Hello, everybody. My name is Jeff, and I am one of the success team members here at BigTime. The goal of today's webinar is really to get you familiar and comfortable with BigTime's reporting basics. This is going to be a really good jump-off point to get you familiar with some of the BigTime reporting functionalities, and is definitely recommended to watch before you really jump into more in-depth reporting features that we have. Uh, so some of the topics that we're going to be covering today are the canned reports available within your BigTime site, as well as being able to manipulate those reports to add some additional information. A reminder before we get going today is BigTime is customizable to your business. And what this means is that although on my screen we may refer to such topics as projects and tasks, you may refer to these items as clients and engagements or projects and phases within your site. And no matter how we define these within our site, the process will remain the same. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to jump into the report center, and to get there, what you need to do is select the reports, report center. And just to discuss what we're looking at here, so we have those 5 tiles towards the top of our screen. As you can see, we have time tracking, invoicing, payroll, task list, and the magnifying glass. And when you go click through these tiles, it does bring up correlating reports pertaining to the actual header. So obviously, your time tracking is going to bring up any time-related reports, and same goes for invoicing, payroll, and task list. Um, and to jump into what this magnifying glass is, this is if you want to create your own custom report. So let's just say, for example, when you're looking at these tiles, you're like, hey, what if I want to create a report that's just strictly expense detail? If you wanted to do that, what you need to do is select the magnifying glass and select create your report. When you click create your report, it does bring up different reporting types. So think of these report types as almost like buckets that hold different data points. So, uh, you do want to think, you want to think and actually have a good general understanding of what you want to report on before you actually select these types. And the reason for saying that is this client list report type is going to have different data points than your timesheet summary. So that's just really something to keep in mind. Okay. I'm going to close out of this and moving to our lower portion of our screen. For these all reports, this is every single report that you have created in your BigTime site within one location. And these different headers are where you're able to actually publish these specific reports. So you can publish reports to public, basic, client reports, staff reports, as well as allocations, invoicing, payroll, budget planning, client status, tasks, as well as other reports. Okay, so for today's example, I really want to get into kind of customizing a pre-built report. And for the report I want to focus on today, it's going to be time tracking. So I want to pick my correlating time tracking tile. And let's start with a timesheet detail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select view. And this is the standard timesheet detail report within your BigTime site. So let's just go through some of these columns that we have here. We have our client, staff member, category, date, input, is it no charge, as well as any timesheet notes included with that. And let's discuss these top options that are towards the top portion of our screen. So if I select edit report settings, if you're filtering by a date range, selecting edit report settings is going to bring up that actual time range that you can select to pull that specific information into this report. Also too, since I'm on this screen right here, for anybody that's running a budget status report and filtering by date range, a word of caution. If you are running that type of budget report by date range, you will need to actually have dates entered for your tasks or phases or your to-dos within your site. And the reason for that being is if there's no dates entered for that and you run that budget report by a date range, you're going to end up with a blank report. And the reason for that being is BigTime just doesn't know what specific date range to select those tasks from. So if you're running into that issue, I would definitely check in that date portion for your tasks and phases. Okay, also below that, we do have the ability of sharing this report to different report groups. So if I check this box, it's going to bring up the actual reporting group option. If you click the drop down, you can then pick your report group. And just to talk about report groups a little bit more, if I select edit these values, within my site, I already do have some report groups created, but you do have the functionality of adding a new group. And essentially what this report group is going to help you do is share this report for specific security groups within your BigTime site. So for example, my report group A is specifically for that report group A user right group. And you do have the functionality of, adding other security groups if you want to share them with more additional people as well. Okay, so I'm just going to exit out of this, and I'm going to exit out of the report settings. And let's discuss these options towards the top right. So this first option, this I with the circle, is your field summary. So your field summary is going to give you a description of all the headers and columns that you have within your actual report. And this really comes in handy if you're getting to those more in-depth reports of maybe, let's just say, any type of invoice list report or a project list report where some of these headers are going to have calculations. So like any maybe like margin percentages that you have, you'd be able to click this field summary and see the calculation that that margin percentage is pulling just to make sure it's the correct field that you're looking for when creating this report. Okay, I'm going to exit out of this. You do have the functionality of using your search option. So let's just say I wanted to just pull in only my best practices categories. When you type in that keyword, it will select that keyword in green, and then you also have the functionality of actually toggling between those highlighted options by using these arrow options towards the top right. I'm just going to exit out of this. You also have the functionality of actually using this live filter. So let me jump back into here. So with this live filter, and that's a triangle with the square, the live filter helps you just filter out any option on the fly. So if I really wanted to just like create a report with everybody's information, but then I wanted to really hone in on a specific individual, what you could do is just select that live filter, click into Sylvia for this example, and select apply. And this is going to bring up only Sylvia's time that we've had entered. So this is something that you can utilize if you don't want to use like a hard-coded filter to maybe filter out specific staffers. So that is just one example of that. And as you can see, when I actually clicked that live filter, I accidentally clicked one of the input headers. You also have the functionality of grouping using the live group feature by clicking any of these headers while you're in the report. So that you do have that functionality as well. Moving down the line to our export feature. So we have the functionality of exporting to PDF, Excel, as well as a Word document. And if you move down the line to customize, this is when we actually want to get into actually editing this editing the pre-canned report. So if I, click customize and customize again, then we can get in the back end, but I will show you more in depth in just a moment. Below the customize feature, you do have the ability of creating a copy. So let's say, one of your coworkers creates a really great report, but you're like, hey, you know what, I just need some additional fields entered, but you maybe want to keep the integrity of the original report. All you need to do is click create copy, and then you can get into customizing. That way, you can keep the original report and then make tweaks to your copy. Okay. Also getting into report permissions, this just pulls up that feature of sharing those specific reporting groups again. So you do have the functionality of going to edit report group settings, as well as just actually the report permissions tab to get to those report groups. Okay. And in addition to that, you do have the expand option just to give you some more screen real estate. Okay, so let's get into actually customizing this report. I'm going to go to customize and customize again. And what we're looking at is the back end of this report. So uh, you do have the ability of seeing all the columns, obviously, but if you click into the blank space underneath, it does bring up some additional options. So let's just get into the client tab. You do have the ability of adding additional fields within the report by clicking this drop down. However, there is a different route you can take, which I actually prefer. So So you can select this, but if you do click this plus sign, that's going to bring up all these other additional data fields that you can import on, and it's actually going to give you a description if you hover over it. So anytime you're picking these data points and you're kind of questioning, hey, what is this in fact actually pulling? You can hover over it; it'll give you a brief description. In addition to that, you do have that field summaries option now. Okay, I'm just going to exit out of this. I'm going to start working my way down the line of the column label and heading. That will just change the wording towards the top of your label. You do have the ability of text alignment, so you can have left, center, or right. And you can also get into your drill down link. This is a pretty cool feature because let's just say if you click in your client, you do have the ability of creating a hyperlink directly to the client. You could do it strictly for your list, per your client, allocation summaries, tasks, timesheet summary, as well as even open up staffer information and time entry detail. So that's just a really handy feature. And I think I'll actually utilize that in this report that I'm creating. But for now, I'm just going to brush over that, and we'll get into that at a later time. Anytime you actually want to move any of these headers around or these columns, you do have the ability of clicking the arrows, and that will move that information around. So let's get into actually customizing this report. So I want to add some additional information. I want to see how many of these hours that have been tracked are actually billable, and also if they were in fact submitted and have actually been invoiced for. So as I previously mentioned, if you do want to add these columns, that's this plus sign. And these are just all the data points that we can actually add into this report. So reporting is fairly robust, and you really do have such a wide selection of different data points to include into your report. Okay, so I'm just going to move down the line. I want to include my task information to see any type of budget item that's being tracked against. Is it submitted? And also how much of that is actually billable? And I want to see how much of that, in fact, has been invoiced. So now that I have my field selected, I actually want to move these around a little bit. So I'm going to move this task portion a bit to the right. So my category, my task, the date. I want to put this billable next to my input so I can cross-reference. And billable also, is it submitted? And I'm going to put that all the way down to the notes portion. And anytime you actually don't want any of these columns, it's just as easy as clicking the subtraction sign or minus. When you select that, it's going to ask you, hey, are you sure you want to remove this column? The answer is yes. And let's just move these around a little bit. You can make columns. You can adjust the columns actually to be wider if you prefer. And you also have the ability of activating column groups. So what this will do, let's just say, so I have my input and billable. These are both hour fields. So let's create an actual a header for that. So for that, I'm just going to put hours. And you do have the ability of once that is saved to actually stretch that out over those 2 hour fields. So that'll just help making your report a little bit more readable and easier to look at. Okay, so before I get into any grouping or filtering, let's just see how this report looks. When you click create your report, you now have some additional options. So this title right here, this is actually going to be what your report is named by, or actually what you're titling your report, excuse me. So with your timesheet detail, I'm going to do timesheet detail by staffer. And that published to, these are those different report locations that we were looking at in the actual report center itself. So you have that staff reports, allocations, payroll, and so on. And this is really just showing where this report's going to end up in your BigTime site in the report center. So since it's a timesheet detail by staffer, I want to select these staff reports. And this description right here, so this is handy when you have multiple reports, yet you need a little bit of a description, actually know what in fact you're reporting on. So, and I'll show you where this description will populate. And below that, you also do the functionality of having the billing and cost rates updated each time you run that report. So if you're updating billing and cost rates per quarter, or at the end of the year, you do have the functionality of checking this. So each time the report's run, it's actually going to reflect that accurate representation of those hours and bill rates. So I'm going to select Publish Report. Let's just see how this looks. Since it is a timesheet detail, it is deferring to the current month. So I'm just going to open this up a little bit. And I did that just by selecting Edit Report Settings. Once I select Run Report, oops, actually, excuse me, just Run Report. Okay, so we're kind of getting there with how this report's looking, or how I want it to look, but it is a bit of information all at once, and I'm kind of having a hard time differentiating which time belongs to who. So let's get into actually grouping this report to make it just look a bit nicer. So let's go to Customize, Edit this report, and just to show you what those grouping options look like, if I go to Options, Customize Grouping, I want to group this report by staff member, and that also brings up the ability for me to actually add a group subtotal. So I definitely want to see that subtotal of each staffer. Below that, you do have the ability to enable dynamic subtotals when you click on that column heading. You can show an overall total row at the bottom of the actual report. And you also have the ability to not hide any columns when subtotaling, and also have page breaks between staff member values. So let's just update this report. And let's actually see how this looks now. So after I publish this report, I'm just going to open it up one more time. So as you can see, we have all of Sam's time with the amount billed, as well as our category, tasks, or dates. But then we have our subtotal below that. You know what, maybe we'll want to actually make this a little bit more digestible and actually show what client each time belongs to, because I don't really like how it's grouping. It has all the time kind of just jumbled up per your client. So in addition to actually adding a group, a hard filter grouping, you can just click this header as well. So there's a few different routes you can take to get to the same location. Okay, let's get into Customize, Edit this report, and I'm just going to add that hard-coded client group. Once I update that report, I also want to show you the different edit report settings once we're in the back end of the report. So when you are in the back end of the report, if you click Edit Report Settings, you do have the functionality of having no specific client selected. So that's how my report's set right now. So it's just bringing in all the information from my site in the one report. You can also get client specific with it. Below that, you also have the ability to show what the report viewer should see. So there's currently no security settings on this report. You do have the functionality of having only the data for clients that they're staffed on, as well as only data for staffers they manage. So this second option right here, this ties into if you're assigning teams per your clients. And then this last option ties into the department. So you can have individuals placed into departments and give management authority over those specific departments, which helps those managers run reports as well as approve any time or expenses for people within those departments. Below that, we also have date range filtering. So any date column that you had entered into your report, you can filter by. And maybe like a better example of this would be if you had an invoice list report and you had your draft sent or due date within the report, you could select any one of those individual dates that you can filter by. And that last option is you can filter the results of a selected staffer. So if you maybe don't want to add a hard-coded filter of a staffer, you do have the ability of checking this box. And what that is going to do is when you run the report, it's going to pick a specific individual. So actually, I'll show you what those examples look like. So if I want to click a specific client as well as a specific staffer, when I update this report and publish it, when I run it, it's going to ask you to pick the specific date range, maybe the specific client, and let's just pick a specific staffer and see what type of information is pulled. So that's pretty much what that'll look like. You pick your specific client, your one individual staffer, and it's going to bring in all that information. Okay, So I'm just going to get back into editing this report. I'm going to take off those filters and just restore it back to the original format. And the last thing I do want to talk about is getting into those different filtering options. So let's just say you want to filter out the report by maybe the submission status. So just to show you what that'll look like beforehand, I'm going to open up this filter. So as you can see, if I stretch this out just a little bit and to actually show my submitted time, so all our submitted time, that yes or no option, that yes or no option that we're seeing is just coming up as a little checkbox. And so obviously there's all the time in this report actually has in fact submitted. So if you want to really kind of consolidate this, you can go into customize, edit this report. We have our submission status. So if we know all this time in fact has been submitted, let's actually get into hiding this column because we don't need to see that anymore. So let's select yes. We want to save. And so now that that submitted column is in fact hidden and we just want to show this report to only show submitted time, let's get into filtering options. So if I go to options, customize filtering, I go to my submitted column, and you do have a bunch of different options. So you have none, equals to, not equal to, less than, greater than, less than, equal to, greater than or equal to, contains, does not contain, in, not in. You can get into equals staffer ID or also staffer ID in the list. So for this option, since I'm submitted, I specifically want to get into equals and yes. When you get into filtering, for your value portion that you have right here, you need to be very careful that you have actually typed in just as it is, just as it exists within your BigTime site. So if there's some minor spelling difference or just a variation that you enter in here, if it does not match up exactly as it lives within your BigTime site, your report's just going to end up showing up blank, and that's because BigTime isn't really sure what specifically to filter by. So you always want to make sure your spelling is identical in this portion. And you can also have the functionality of adding additional filters. So when you do so, you need to make sure that you also have your correct filtering combination. And this is where it can get a little complicated. But if you run into any issues, feel free to reach out to support. We're absolutely here to help. But this is when you'd want to have 1 and 2 or 3, or 1 and 2 is 3. So as I mentioned, it can get slightly complicated. So you just need to make sure that these filter combinations are in fact correct so that report is pulling that desired information that you're looking for. Okay, I am going to select update report. And when I select create, I'm going to publish. And now we can see that that column is in fact hidden and it's only pulling in submitted time. So this is really how exactly I want my report to look. It's broken up by staffer. I have those subtotals per my client. I have the dynamic total towards my bottom of the screen. So yeah, this is a great looking report. I'm happy with this. So this is something I would definitely maybe share to any of my managers. If you do get into wanting to share something to the public reports portion, how you would do that is when you actually created the report, let's just edit this report. You want to create it one more time, and you would just select public. It's as easy as that. And if you get into actually selecting this to to publish to these report groups, that's always going to end up in my report. And oops, let me just jump back into the report. And that is under my timesheet detail by staffer. So if you actually did want to share that, it's as easy as edit report settings and share that report with your report groups. And since this is more like a staff-centered report, I want to go to customize, edit this report, create one more time, and have it located under staff, publish. Voila. Okay, so that's really like the run through of just customizing a pre-built time detail report. Let's get into actually creating a report from scratch. So let's go to Reports, Report Center. As you can see when I scroll down, I have my timesheet detail by staffer report that we just created. But just to reiterate, when you do want to create a report from scratch, that is the magnifying glass and create your report. And okay, so I want to create an expense detail report. I want to see what expenses are associated to what clients from what staffer. So I'm going to select expense detail. Next, I'm going to select my client. I want to get into the date of when that expense was created. I definitely want to see my expense category. I'm going to I'm going to leave tasks out of it. I do want to have a note associated to the expense itself. And is it submitted? Absolutely want to see the cost associated to it. And also too, as I'm scrolling down here, you can also, use the search bar functionality. So if you know specifically what you want to import, you can just type into here and it's going to pull up. So I do know that I want to have staffer information. So let's just type in staff. That will pull up our staffer details. So I want to pick my first and last name. And now I have my date, my category, note, my cost. You know what? I do want to see if it is actually non-reimbursable or non-billable. So let's just scroll down and look for that information. Let me just pull, I'm going to place it to the left of my client. So if I go up here, let's scroll, let's say non-reimbursable. So is it no charge and is it non-billable? Okay. And actually, you know what, let's just move these over a little bit to the right. And I'm just moving the columns by using these arrows. I'm going to jump into my name of my staffer, and let's put that by the client. Okay. So we have the client, the name, date, category, notes. I always like my notes to the right-hand portion of the screen. Submitted, cost. Okay, and let's just get into just grouping because I want to group this specifically by my staffer, and that is in this case going to be the name. We'll add that subtotal, update. I'm not really trying to filter this report by anything, so I'll just leave it be. When I select create report, let's change the title, expense detail, and let's just put that under staff reports again. And we'll do staffer expenses filtered by date range. And when I select publish, let's see how this looks. Okay, so nothing for the date of March or the month of March. So if I open this up, awesome. Also too, where I typed in that description, that can always be found by hovering over the I next to the report name. So staffer expenses filtered by date range. So we have our staffer, the date, the expense category, is it submitted, as well as it's non-billable or if it's no charge. So as you can see, to create a report from scratch on the fly, it's not too difficult as long as you know specifically like what you're reporting on. So you really do have that functionality. Also too though, you really do want to get comfortable with editing pre-built reports just because it's going to save you time from not having to start creating a report from scratch. Okay, so that is really the run through of the reporting webinar. I do, want to thank you for taking time out of your day to watch this. And as you get into creating these reports, obviously you might run into some questions. If you have any difficulty whatsoever, you can click this question mark icon and select live chat. When we have support reps on live chat, this is a live instant messenger between a support rep. So if you're in a report being like, hey, you know what, I'm having issues with this filtering combination. Can you help me out? They'll respond to you and they'll help you from there. In addition to the support live chat, you also always have the ability of sending in an email to support@bigtime.net. And what that'll do is that'll create a case in our support queue, and somebody will reach out to you. And you do have the functionality of just calling in as well. And our support phone number is 312-346-4646, option 2. And just one more time, that is 312-346-4646, option 2. And just other really handy resources that you can utilize is our knowledge base. So if you click the question mark and select knowledge base, this is going to take you to our website where you can really just type in any keyword into our search handle, and it's going to bring up any correlating article that we've had written on it. So it's just like a really useful resource to have. And in addition to that, as you are all aware, is we do have those webinars. So we have webinars pre-recorded and live on project management. We also have them on invoicing, as well as reporting and resource allocation for our premier client. Okay. So just once again, I do want to thank everybody for taking time out of your day. As I previously mentioned, if anything comes up, if you're having any difficulty creating any of these reports, please do not hesitate to reach out to support, as we are here to help. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.